How's it, guys? Happy Friday. We made it to the weekend. There we go. Kettle's boiled. Some Earl Grey tea. That's what I need. End of a long week. I'll let that steep for a bit. Trust you guys have got your cup of tea ready, and looking forward to chapter 6. I'm gonna do 2 chapters again this evening because they're both quite short. So 6 and 7 coming right up. Okay. Oh yeah. Christmas patties. I love this one. This one always makes me chuckle. Tozo was about 20 years old when he first came to work for us. He was a Muha tribesman, and up until then, he had never done anything besides herd cattle and help cut bananas for making banana beer. One day, he took me to his village where they were making banana beer. Bunches of bananas were cut green and put in a pit to ripen. If you left them on the tree to ripen, the bats and neighbors would get them first. If you put them in a pit and covered them over with banana leaves, they ripened within a week. Then they were peeled by the women and placed in a wooden trough of water. A certain type of round grass was cut and placed in the trough. Feet were washed, and all the kids, including me, jumped in and pulverized the bananas with our feet. The product resulted in a sweet banana drink. They called this women's beer. The remainder was placed in large clay pots and covered over. This was left to ferment for 7 days, and then the men would have a beer drink. As there were thousands of banana trees in the district of Buha, there were lots of beer drinks. Each man had his own drinking straw, made from a reed and kept in a cow's tail, which was also used for swatting flies. Each man having his own straw served 2 purposes. One didn't contaminate the beer, and if you wanted to poison a neighbor, you put the poison in his straw, hence saving the precious beer for the others. Approximately 3 men died every week in our area from poisoning. And as you can tell, drinking beer was the primary reason for living in Buha. Each tribe has its own speciality, and the Waha were known for their ability to consume great quantities of beer. Dad and I were walking together up the hill from the hospital one day when we met an old woman that Dad knew well. He told her that the next day a church service would be held, and that if she wanted, she could attend. She told Dad that she couldn't go to church as she drank beer. "You can drink beer and still go to church," Dad replied. "Ah, no," the old woman said. "If I go to church, then I would learn about God and not want to drink beer. I don't want anything to get in the way of my beer drinking." That pretty much summed up the Waha pastime. So one could say that Tozo's becoming a cook was a great step outside the boundaries of his culture of herding cows and preparing beer. Mom gave him a shilling increase for every dish that he learned to prepare. So in a short time, he had become an accomplished cook. Well, get my tea going. Nothing but twinings. I think they're the very best. Hashtag not sponsored. But yeah, the fact that I managed to find Twinings Earl Grey in the middle of America is something of a miracle to me. Right. Cheers. Alright, so Tozo is becoming an accomplished cook. One of our favorite breakfast courses was guavas on toast. Oh, I love guavas on toast. It's like applesauce but made out of guavas. We grew them in the garden and so were able to have this most of the year. On top of the guava sauce, we would put great globs of cream skimmed off the top of the boiled milk, which had been left to sit all night. Ah, that sounds good. We bought our milk from the local people. They believed that the milk was a separate part of the cow, and if they sold the milk without part of the cow would die. So they would put the cow's urine in with the milk. Dad had a urinometer brought in from the hospital, and if the milk had more than 20% urine, we wouldn't buy it. We got so used to having urine in the milk that when my sister and I tasted real milk, we spat it out and told everyone that it was bad. It took us quite a while to get used to the bland taste of real milk. Oh, sus. One morning, when we had a lot of guests, Tozo was a bit behind on all the toast orders. Mom went into the kitchen to see what the holdup was. Tozo was sitting on the floor in front of the wood stove. The way he made toast was to stick the slice of bread with a long fork and hold it in front of the coals of the fire from the wood stove. Up until now, we had always thought that he put it on top of the stove to keep it warm until he brought it to the table on a plate. But on this day, Mom found otherwise. There was Tozo, sitting on the floor with his bare feet in front of the fire. All the newly made pieces of toast between his toes, keeping warm while more was being made. Mom didn't say anything. Later, when she told us, she said that we'd all survived that long with his toast. A little longer wouldn't hurt. That's fair enough. I did notice that the next time Dad and I went to Kigomo, on the list of things to buy from Mrs. Kouvarakis was a toast holder. The concept of germs had no place in Waha culture. Any sickness was always an evil spirit. Dad used to go out to villages sometimes to either see a patient or just to go walking. He loves to walk, and his wanderings took him all over the country. A grateful patient met him one day and wanted to show respect to Dad for healing him. However, the only thing he could find to give was a single boiled egg. But with both hands, he crouched to a low position and gave the egg to Dad. This was a sign of great respect. Then, the man must have thought of something because he quickly took back the egg and started to peel it. In doing so, the egg got covered with dirt and ashes from the fire. The man looked at the egg, looked at Dad, popped the whole egg in his mouth, and as he squeezed it out of his mouth, the whole egg was made white again. In the palm of his hand, he offered Dad the peeled egg again. I looked on in astonishment as Dad took the egg and ate it. He told the man how good it was and what a wonderful gift he had received. Wow. That was the day I realized what a gentleman my father was. Mom had a wonderful vegetable garden. No one ever came to visit without going away with baskets of vegetables. Our most frequent visitor was Father Dave from the Catholic Mission, 11 miles away. He rode an old BMW motorcycle that you could hear coming from a mile away. He would eat a great meal and then leave with a huge basket of vegetables, enough to last him until the next time he came to visit. We often went to visit him, too, as he was the only white man in the district. He taught me about chilies. Like a fool, I believed him when he gave me a red chili and told me it was a new kind of sweet. I chomped into it and had the sugar bowl handy for me when I started to froth at the mouth, gagging and spitting all over the place. Father Dave had a cook boy who made the most delicious meat patties I have ever eaten. They were tender, moist, mixed with a few vegetables, and a dish that everyone looked forward to every time we went to visit. One Christmas, we were all there at Father Dave's for lunch. There were a couple of other families there, and lunch was served. The patties we had all looked forward to were not what we had expected. Father Dave took one bite and then went bustling off to the kitchen, his long robes flapping. We could hear him berating the cook in Swahili. Of all the days in the whole year, you pick this one to make a mess of the patties. What is the matter with you? But Bwana, when it is just the tellers, it is easy. But how can I chew the meat for so many guests? Times have progressed, and deepest, darkest Africa has been tamed. But cooks continue to give me a giggle. One of my patients was telling me how they had made a serving hatch between the kitchen and the dining room. The cook was informed that he was to serve the food through the serving hatch from then on. At the next meal, a leg appeared through the serving hatch, followed by a behind. The cook then eased his head through, followed by both arms holding the casserole. The other leg, the other leg then came through, and the cook passed the comment, "Madam, it was so much easier when you let me use the door." Hamish told me of a fancy do he went to in Gwanda. It was a black coat and tie affair. The new cook had been instructed that after the hors d'oeuvres and soup had been served, he was to bring the suckling pig through on the silver tray, and to be sure it has the red apple in its mouth and the parsley in the ears. All went well. The bell for the main course was rung, and the cook, all dressed in white, came through bearing the suckling pig on high, resting on its silver tray. But the cook had in his mouth the red apple, and sprouting out of his ears great bunches of parsley. Oh, that reminds me. We've had a few stories with our cooks over the years. One springs to mind. Was my mom went into the kitchen to see what was going on with breakfast, and the cook was boiling these eggs, like probably just like 3 or 4, maybe 5 eggs in the bottom of this huge pot full of water, So my mom says, his name was Isaac. My mom says, Isaac, you don't have to put that much water, you just have to cover the top of the eggs. It's a waste of water, it's a waste of energy, waste of time, it takes too long to boil. So Isaac looks at it and says, no, but madam, once the eggs are finished boiling, then I can make tea. We wondered why the tea tasted so funny for so long. He was using the water from boiling the eggs to make our tea. Oh, I mean, brilliant, That's time-saving stuff. Anyway. Forward. Onwards and upwards, as they say. Right. Chapter 7. Papa Mata. I remember him well, and I remember him worthy of thy praise. That's also from The Merchant of Venice, by Shakespeare. At 11 years of age, I was fluent in Swahili and passable in a few of the other local dialects. I was a good hunter and had caught up to my age level in school, which I did by correspondence. My chicken business was thriving, and I felt that this was about as good as life got. So it was quite a shock to me when one day Dad told Patty and me that he was sending us to Ngoma Hospital, where the Newbolds live. They had 6 children, and another family there had 2. They had a certain spinster by the name of Miss Whiteman who taught them, and Dad thought it would be a good experience for us to mix with some white children. Dad knew the Newbolds well, as he and Rob Newbold had been in medical school together and apparently got up to lots of mischief together. So it was that Patty and I found ourselves living in a large family. Now, my grandfather on my mother's side had started the hospital at Ngoma. He had come to Africa in 1925 as a missionary doctor, done a lot of hunting out of necessity, and had his own ideas on how to heal people and to spread the gospel. When he arrived at Ngoma, he built a sod house for his family. From what I hear, it was the only one of its kind in the whole country. Hearing a racket in the dustbin one night, he walked outside with a stick and gave the behind of whatever it was a good whack. When it pulled its head out of the dustbin, it just happened to be a huge leopard. When this story was retold about the country, it was thought that this would be the man to take out the man-eating lions that were hassling the villagers along Lake Kivu. It had been a long night delivering babies at the hospital, which probably had a lot to do with Grandad's frame of mind. As he got back to his house in the early hours of the morning, he was greeted by an old man who informed Grandad of a lion that had just killed and eaten one of the people in his village. Grandad took his 7x57 Mauser and followed the old man down to the place where the lion had last been seen. They followed the spoor for a while, and when Grandad saw he was getting close, he reached into his pockets to get the bullets. Alas, there were no bullets. He sent the old man back to his house to get the bullets, and he sat down and promptly went to sleep. In recounting the story later to me, he told me that something woke him up, but it was not the lion. A sixth sense awoke him, and he sat there listening, every sense wide awake by now. Then it was that he heard the lion coming towards him in the tall grass. He had his back against a tree, so he slowly rose to a standing position. A small clearing of about 20 feet was right in front of the tree. The grass moved, and at the end of the clearing stood the man-eater, its tail whipping from side to side, ready to pounce. Grandad just stared at it, crouching down silently. The lion took a cautious step towards Grandad, and he also took a quick step towards the lion. Now they were quite close, so Grandad threw up his arms and charged the lion, shouting for all he was worth. The man-eater took off and was later shot by Papa Matter, another Swiss missionary who came to be a school teacher and was a very good friend of Grandad. When Patty and I came to live with the Newbolds, Papa Matter was an old man. He had long since given up trying to teach the locals. He now had a little farm down in the edge of the lake, and when I found out that he was a friend of my Grandad, I visited him a lot. It was Papa Matter who gave me my first pineapple. He took it out of his garden and gave it to me, telling me to eat it, which I did, skin and all, as I had no idea how to eat it. He just stood there watching me with a big grin on his face. When I was done, he asked, "So, how did you like it?" "Fine, very sweet, but a little rough," I replied, to which he broke up laughing. Then he went in to tell his wife. She brought out another pineapple, a big knife and a breadboard, and proceeded to show me how to prepare a pineapple. Papa Matter also gave me Flicker, a fine specimen of a donkey, but without a doubt the laziest of creatures. I would sit on him for a long time trying to get him to move, and he would just stand there. One day, 3 of the Newbold boys and I were visiting, and with a twinkle in his eye, Papa Matter came to me and told me he had a special way of getting Flicker to move, and we should all get on. This we did, all 4 of us, excited at the prospect of going for a donkey ride. Papa Matter then took Flicker's tail, lifted it, and put a freshly baked potato under the tail. He immediately clamped down his tail, and the heat must have hit the turbo button in his brain, because for 400 meters we all had the fastest ride of our lives. To this day, I fail to understand why we didn't fall off. Only after dropping the potato did Flicker come to his usual immobile stance, but we did get our ride to remember. School lasted from 8 in the morning to 12. I was used to doing my schoolwork outside under a tree and by myself, so not a lot in the way of studies was accomplished. It was there that I learned to dream. I would stare out the open door at the swallows and the distant lake and go over all the stories Grandad had told me. I'd dream about the 4-hour period being over so we could go down to the lake. Lake Kivu was only about a mile from Ngoma Hospital, and we used to often go down to the lake. I didn't know how to swim, but after a few trips to the lake, I learned to dog paddle around. I wouldn't swim in a random lake in Africa. It's asking to be eaten by crocs. One day, after watching all of us swimming around, Papa Matter suggested that he could use us on a fishing trip. I was so excited. There was only one thing that bothered me, and that was the lack of lines and hooks. When I mentioned this to Papa Mata, he replied in his heavy Swiss German accent that he was going to teach me something today. We went to a certain point on the lake where the waters drop off very steeply, and out of a bag, Papa Mata took a stick of dynamite, tied a stone to it, lit the short fuse, and threw it in. 30 seconds later, we felt the earth shake. Now, he says, in about another 30 seconds, you will see lots of fish coming to the surface. I want you boys to swim out and take this little boat with you. When you see a big fish, you bite it on the back of the head and throw it into the boat. You understand? We nodded, looking at the small boat that was almost flat. No wonder you had to kill the fish. If they flopped only once, they would fall out of the boat. Later we found out that it would not even carry a person. Its single and only purpose was to pick up stunned fish. Here they come. Quick now, boys, before they wake up. Be sure to bite them hard. Papa Mata was shouting encouragement to us from the bank while we swam out to the larger fish. I bit my first fish on the back of the neck, and sure enough there was a satisfying crunch, and I threw it into the small boat. It never even moved. We collected all the big fish and then pushed the boat back to shore. Even before we got to shore, I saw the smaller fish regaining consciousness and begin to swim back down to the depths. Papa Mata was pleased with his catch for the day and praised our swimming abilities, telling us also how the local fisherman had taught him to bite the fish on the back of the head. We pleaded with him to do it again, but he told us he had enough for now. He promised that the next time he needed fish, he would call us, and he did. On another dynamiting trip, Papa Mata and I went to the garden to search for fresh fruit for the meal his wife was preparing. You'll see that village over there, Billy boy. A witch doctor used to live there, and your grandfather hated him. He proceeded to tell me how the witch doctor had put a black egg in the doorway of one of the house of the hospital. Okay, this guy uses too many ofs. He proceeded to tell me how the witch doctor had put a black egg in the doorway of the house of one of the hospital staff. This was a sign that you were going to die. The person would not eat or drink, and so, of course, they would die. Grandad put the word out that he was collecting rotten eggs. He collected about 200 of them and kept them in his shed. The more rotten they got, the darker they got, and the darker they became until they were almost black. Then he took his stick and paid the witch doctor a visit. He gave the lecture a man. It's been a long week, guys. It's been a long week. He then took his stick and paid the witch doctor a visit. He gave the man a lecture on what happened to people who messed with his hospital staff, and at the same time gave him a few biffs with the stick. Then he tied the witch doctor to a tree and proceeded with his lecture on the gospel according to Grandad, and as he spoke, he threw all these black eggs at him. By the time Grandad got to the bottom of the basket, he had said all that he wanted to say. The witch doctor was covered in stinking eggs, and he received a warning. If you are not in the front row of church this week, I am going to come and give you another lecture. The witch doctor was on the front row of church and continued to come every week until one day he decided to become a pastor. He became the first local pastor of Ngoma district. Yeah, that old man, he couldn't preach too good. In fact, I never heard him preach once, but he sure did have a way with people. He swung an imaginary stick twice in the air, smiling at the memories of his old friend. Alright, it's a bit of a longer one since it is the weekend. I hope you rest up well and sleep well. See you tomorrow.